how about we get started with how the story is being written right now on the Iran front. So as the story goes from the U.S. side, Donald Trump had ordered an attack that was supposed to happen today or tomorrow. And as he ordered the attack, Donald Trump claims that Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia picked up their phones, told Donald Trump to wait just a minute, do not attack, because Iran is going to be ready to negotiate. You should delay this fact. And so New York Times wrote this. They said that Trump threatens Iran and then pulls back all on the same day. He was a little early to Taco Tuesday. And in this, and I'll pull it up and I'll get your reaction to it, Larry. Sorry, wrong article. Wrong picture. I'll get to that later.
I'll just preempt it and say it's a lie, but I'll explain why it's a lie.
Yeah. So here's the article. It says Trump threatens Iran and then pulls back all on the same day. And in this, though, they cite a U.S. military official who actually says that rather than it being the Gulf convincing Donald Trump not to do this, it was actually Iran's military capabilities and the fact that they had been able to track U.S. military operations, including their air operations, with more accuracy and thus more lethality, meaning fighter jets could be coming down. So, Larry, how about you help us understand what exactly has happened here? Because it seems like there's just panic erupting on all fronts, despite Trump's confidence that he can hit Iran any day, anytime.
Well, there are a couple of things have to be in place before there's any military action. One, so over the weekend, Pentagon issued the stop movement order. So that is a precursor that, okay, there is going to be offensive action. But the one that will trigger that, you know, that it's coming down the pike is when the CENTCOM issues what's called air tasking orders, ATOs, when you start using the acronyms. There haven't been any ATOs issued yet. So that's why I said, this notion that he was ready to attack yesterday, that's complete nonsense. It's just a lie. They weren't ready to attack. The determinant, the one country that will determine whether or not the United States carries out a military strike is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia right now is hosting the KC-135 air refuelers. They're based at Prince Saud Air Base, just outside of Riyadh. And why is that important? Well, most of the combat aircraft, the F-35s in particular, are based over in Jordan and Israel, is my understanding. So they have a combat radius of 550 miles. Maybe if they got a light load, they can get 600 miles, but between 500 and 600 miles. Okay, guys, look at your map. Ladies and gentlemen, look at your maps. Look at where Mawafaq al-Salti Air Base is in Jordan, just outside of the capital. And then go over to Riyadh. That's over 800 miles. Okay, that means those planes are going to have to be refueled even before they get within 300 miles of Riyadh. And then from there, they fly, they finish the other 300 miles to Riyadh, and they can just pass Riyadh. They could launch a Tomahawk or a JASSM missile into Iran. And then they've got to be immediately refueled. So these planes to operate, each F-35 is going to need at least probably minimum of 4 air refuelings just to stay in the air and be able to get back to the home base. So this is why these air refuelers forward position there in Saudi Arabia are critical. Now, we saw 2 weeks ago when Trump announced Project Freedom that was going to also use combat aircraft to so-called open up the strait. It got shut down within 36 hours because the Saudis said, nope, not using our space. Kuwaiti said, us too, we're with them. And Trump gets on the phone with MBS, and MBS basically tells him to go pound sand. So like I said, we'll see where we stand right now. I do know that there are extensive efforts underway by the Chinese and the Russians in terms of trying to erect this new security architecture in the Persian Gulf involving Turkey, the Saudis, and Iran. I'm waiting to. I have a source who's able to provide information out of Pakistan from most senior levels. So the Pakistanis are very much in touch with both the Saudis and the Iranians, particularly with the Saudis. They have a mutual defense pact with them. So we'll get an idea if in fact the Saudis say no, you're not using our territory, then Trump's options are really, really limited at that point.
Yeah, great points. And Colonel Wilkerson, before I get your comments, I'll just read this short bit from the New York Times talking about this ordered attack, pulled back situation, Taco Tuesday. The official warned that the downing of the F-15E fighter jet last month and the ground fire that struck an F-35 revealed that American flight tactics had become too predictable in ways that allowed Iran to defend against them more capably. Perhaps most important, the U.S. military official said that while 5 weeks of intensive bombing may have killed several Iranian leaders and commanders, the war has left a more hardened, resilient adversary. So your thoughts about what's just gone on here, Colonel Wilkerson?
Well, this must be very embarrassing to an Air Force chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I can only imagine. Something I picked up on this morning, I think it's accurate, and it comes from a number of sources, one of them Reuters. Yesterday, Pakistan deployed 8,000 troops and a squadron of fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. As Larry was saying, the deployment was confirmed this morning, at least as far as I could tell. And I'm asking myself, this is a squadron of 16 aircraft, mostly JF-17 fighters. And I'm asking myself, are these deployed to protect Saudi Arabia from the United States? Or are these deployed in some way to change the balance with regard to the Iran-U.S. war, Iran-Israel-U.S. war? Mm-hmm. And if so, in what direction? Especially with regard to Israel. And are the troops that are being deployed along with them, according to the report, for the same purpose? Are they for protecting the Saudis? And if they're for protecting the Saudis, and as Larry indicated, there is a growing relationship between both Turkey and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, against whom? My guess would be you can flip a coin on that. The United States, under certain circumstances where we barge in, but I can't figure out any other reason than to honor their relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is new and growing, but also to send a signal, perhaps, like I'm describing. Whom are you defending against, and who are you protecting the Saudis against? If I were Pakistan, I think I'd be very circumspect about the way I determine that. I'm not so sure about Mohammed bin Salman because I think he's already made his decisions, and maybe we'll see them here. As to the agreement, as such as it is, the word that came out early this morning, is that there is no agreement whatsoever in terms of the negotiations. The Iranians have claimed you wanted to talk about the nuclear. We refused to talk about the nuclear. We said, well, then that's tough. We'll talk about it with bombs. That's a direct quote from a senior official. So where are we? Going to resume the war, but Trump doesn't know when and doesn't know how. And he doesn't really want to. And meanwhile, we've got the Israeli ambassador to the United States making such egregious statements as J Street is a cancer in the Jewish community in America. And we've got Tom Massey being absolutely floored with Jewish money, millions and millions of dollars trying to defeat him. Man, where are we? Who's mounting the influence, and in what direction, and what's it going to produce? I have no idea at this point. I think that Trump doesn't want to go back to war, but I think he wants to go back to war. So,
Yeah.
Toss the coin.
Yeah, and the Wall Street Journal reports, Larry, that I guess following on what Colonel Wilkerson was saying, that these Gulf countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, the officials, anonymous officials within their regimes are saying they had no idea that Donald Trump was going to strike at the moment he said he was going to strike. So it kind of throws hot water on this idea that they were the ones who pulled him back. What's your comments on this? Because he's done this before too. It wasn't too long ago where I feel like he was talking about delaying strikes because of the Gulf countries.
Well, the reality was in the initial strike on the 28th of February that the Saudis, despite claims, prior public claims to the contrary, that they were opposed to this, they were absolutely supportive of it. So they knew that was coming. They made the bet that the United States could deliver on its promise to protect them because the U.S. had deployed Patriot missile batteries and well as some THAADs to the area. So they were all operating on the assumption that the United States could deliver on its promise to protect them. Well, that turned out to be bullshit. Yeah. And as a result, Saudi Arabia suffered some fairly significant damage, not as bad as what Qatar really took it in the shorts because the destruction of that $1 billion plus radar at Al Udeid, along with several other radar systems. And there was one other that's $1 billion, and I don't know if that was in Kuwait or in Saudi Arabia, but that got taken out.
One in Bahrain, too.
It was at Bahrain?
Yeah, there was one there. I don't know if it was additional to what you just said or.
Yeah, so I mean, but there were at least 5 or 6 different radar systems that were all there integrated for air defense. And man, once those were wiped out, there goes the air defense. And it got to the point where some of these radars would be just taken out by drones, they're leisurely flying along and then boom. So that was a bit of a wake-up call for the Saudis, which then, as I mentioned earlier, we saw 2 weeks ago when they put the kibosh on Operation Project Freedom. So what I don't know right now is whether the Saudis are going to hold firm to that and that they've made their decision. Okay, we're now going forward, going to put our trust and reliance on the Chinese and the Russians to assure that we're not going to be attacked. And, part of that assurance comes that they won't have to worry about the entire premise of having U.S. troops forward deployed was to attack Iran. And it was all based upon a lie, a false assumption that Iran was intending to attack those countries, which it was not. It never has. It was only after those countries allowed themselves to be used as a springboard for attacks in Iran that Iran turned around and said, okay, guys, you're going to pay the price. Now, the other outlier here is the United Arab Emirates. They're not critical. The two countries that are responsible for most of the critical commodities, we're talking oil, that's Saudi Arabia. They're the majority distributor of that. Liquid natural gas, that's Qatar. They're the major distributor of that. Sulfur, that's primarily the Saudis. And then helium and urea, that comes out of Qatar. So between those two countries, in terms of the economic impact on the world, they're critical. Now, Qatar's hurting the most because some of its infrastructure is so damaged, it may be years before it recovers the ability to produce that, which means the world is facing some global shortages for the foreseeable future. Yeah. But it looks like both the Saudis and Qataris have come to the point that, you know what, going with the United States, that brings too much heat. They can't protect us. Yeah, it's like the mafia shows up at your pizza parlor. Hey, you need to buy some insurance so your pizza parlor doesn't catch on fire. Capiche? So, you pay the money. Next month, your pizza parlor burns down. And you go back to the guy and say, hey, I paid you this money. And go, oh, our bad. We didn't have control over that. That's essentially what's happened here. The United States offered protection money. They paid up. They bought U.S. weapons. They bought U.S. Treasury bills. They let the U.S. come base troops there, and bam, they get punched in the nose. They got a bloody nose, and they're saying, wait a second, this wasn't supposed to happen. So I think there's a reevaluation of the relationship with the United States underway right now.
And the shameful, absolutely shameful behavior of the U.S. military of running away to hotels in civilian areas in order to avoid the the very attack that it was the U.S. that ordered to avoid the retaliation for their own attack. But Colonel Wilkerson, there's a mystery though that's been going on in the region that
Only
I want
one?
to comment on. Well, every single day, have you noticed, and this goes to both of you, there have been reports by the UAE, there's been one by Saudi Arabia, but it seems like every day the UAE in particular, this is the Ministry of Defense, is talking about that there are drones, hostile drones, being fired at them, this time 6 in the past 48 hours, and they cite the nuclear energy plant on May 17th that was hit initially. Not a lot of damage being done by these drones, but no word about who's firing them. And it was when it first began blaming Iran. Okay, Iran is doing this, but now the UAE has even backed off on that. They're just saying it's coming from the western border area, and they don't know who did it. They're investigating who did it. So any idea about what's going on here? Is this a way to try to provoke the war to restart? It doesn't seem like it's doing a very good job, but Colonel Wilkerson, to you, and then Larry, if you have any thoughts.
Well, my first guess would be Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Very first guess. Second and third guess, too. Anything they can do to stir the pot. Meanwhile, there was a report in Haaretz this morning that the IDF was quoted. I don't know who it was. It sounded like it was a more senior guy. As let me get this straight. We are on risky, pointless missions in broad daylight and shouldn't be here. This is the IDF senior officer leadership in Lebanon. And I don't blame him for saying that. I saw the stats yesterday on Netanyahu put a clamp on because we could get into the IDF itself and find out post-traumatic stress, suicides, desertions, and absent without leave. We could find all of that out. But now, as I understand why it's dried up, Netanyahu has said no more. You can't reveal that data anymore. Well, we were hearing yesterday that all of those categories are skyrocketing and that they have real problems in terms of manning the forces that are in southern Lebanon. So you got these kind of comments, you got those kinds of comments, or reality, I think, of the situation. In other words, you got another July 2006 or another 1982 in Lebanon for the IDF. They're getting whomped, in short. And you got all the rest of this going on. And so Netanyahu's getting a little bit desperate. I think he's doing all manner of things. And that's the reason I said what I said about the drones, to stir the pot and to make sure that, one, Trump doesn't leave and continues this conflict and fulfills his ultimate dream. And two, that there's not an untoward political situation, which looks like it might be building in Israel right now for himself personally. So look for anything coming out of Israel right now to exacerbate this situation in any way they possibly can.
How about you, Colonel Wilkerson? Larry. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Back to Colonel.
I got promoted to 06. Okay, cool. Let me make a commentary about the casualties from these kinds of wars that don't normally show up. So over the weekend, I was serving as the chief range safety officer for a shooting event that was for veterans, and I had 10 assistant RSOs. One of them, a guy named Tank, he was a Navy corpsman that served with the Marines, and he's been one of my students And another one of my students, a kid named Jamie Lee Sclatter, he too was a Navy corpsman, but he was trained by the Marines as a sniper. And Jamie, he wanted to become an NRA rifle instructor. And so to do that, he had to take the basic rifle course. And so that's where I first met him. And, when I asked him about his experience, he downplayed it. He didn't say, I was a Marine Corps sniper and I don't know why I'm taking a course from you, which he would have been fully entitled to say. But we went through the course, and then at the end, he revealed what his real experience was. And I, began, he's 43 years old. And as I tell these the guys, I said, if you're under 45, you're one of my kids. Okay. I gave him a hard time, but just a humble guy, competent, very kind, and as a corpsman, he spent more time saving lives and taking lives. Anyway, so Tank and I were involved with this shooting event on Sunday, and we said goodbye to each other. And I'm in the car for like 5 minutes, and all of a sudden my phone lights up, and it's Tank, and he's crying because we just learned Jamie committed suicide on Sunday. Now, as I started looking into this, we've had 147,000 soldiers, sailors, and Marines kill themselves since the start of this global war on terror 25 years ago. Yeah. That number is bigger. It's bigger than we only lost 110,000 Marines in World War II in the Pacific War, Marines and Army in the Pacific battles, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima. We got more than that have died from suicide, and the deaths from suicide exceed those that have died since in Vietnam, in Iraq, and 2 engagements, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Somalia. We go down the list. All the damn wars we fought since 1960 haven't even matched up to the total of these casualties we continue to take because of the emotional trauma inflicted on these soldiers. And it's a fucking outrage. And it is the kind of thing that these people in political positions who issue these commands, they never pay the price. And I am furious about it. But you know what? Same thing's happening in Israel. Their suicide rate's going up because you still have people there with a conscience to realize they've murdered women and children, and they can't live with themselves because of that.
Let me throw this on top of that, Danny. The number of homeless veterans is almost as high as the number that Larry's just suggested is the suicide rate. I mean, and we have a president who is commander in chief and who gives absolutely no regard to any of these things at all.
Yeah.
Well, he says it publicly twice, doubled down on it, that he doesn't take into consideration even the general population's financial situations when he's considering what he's going to do about war, and particularly war with Iran. And it's certainly having massive costs, and certainly a major cost of these wars is the U.S. can stave off the massive casualties that it imposes on, at least deaths that it imposes on other countries, but the costs are still incredibly high for those who come back, who survive these wars of aggression that they're ordered to undertake. Definitely. There's no doubt about this. And maybe I can get your guys' comment on this. The New York Times, I don't know if you saw, Donald Trump said that it was treasonous for New York Times, CNN, anyone in the so-called fake news media now to talk about Iran being victorious. Meanwhile, New York Times seems to not have gotten the memo, because as this strike was being pulled back, they published this analysis about how Iran would respond to renewed strikes. And what they say is that Iran could continuously, perhaps given what they've been able to do since the ceasefire as well, fire hundreds of missiles per day at Gulf energy infrastructre, refineries, ports, water desalination plants, and including as well to shut down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And now all of this that the New York Times is reporting is simply coming from reports that they've read, like people just like us who go and read Iranian media and Iranian statements and what they say. And that's basically what they're citing. So how much of this has to do with Trump's hesitation to go back into the war, not least also the additional factor of this burgeoning economic crisis? I've seen some economists say we're about weeks away from a global recession that some of our friends, like Professor Morandi, like could be a Great Depression. Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll jump in and tell you that I think one of the reasons we're seeing great trepidation within the other Gulf countries is just what you pointed out. There's so many other ramifications, but that's one of them. The second tier, as I've called it, of targets that Iran has in its sights, if you will, and plenty of missiles to hit, fast ballistic missiles, plenty of other ordnance that they can expend in the wake of those missiles, because they've been very good at coordinating the really modern high velocity stuff with the low velocity cheap stuff, drones primarily. And they could rip through the region, hitting Ras Tanura, Zonia, Eunice, all those other places where it, as Larry just pointed out, it's absolutely critical for Saudi Arabia. I mean, you could take down 7 to 20% of their oil capacity and it would be down for months. When we did that in China in the petroleum disruption exercise, Ras Tanura, for example, at the time, which was much more productive then than it is now, but it was down for over 6 months. So you took a huge capacity down, and you don't really have the capacity to shift around like we did in that exercise, other than from maybe Russia, maybe the United States. But why would they want to do that if they're making a big profit? Maybe eventually the global recession / depression would force them into that sort of thing. But this would be really traumatic for the region and for the globe if Iran were forced by the circumstances it's in now to hit this second tier of targets, and if they hit it with the devastation that they hit the first tier. And I think they would. I think they'd be just as accurate, they'd be just as devastating, and they'd be 10 times more impactful on the world. And you threw the Bab el-Mandeb in there, that too, and the Houthis have already shown that they can close that for all practical purposes, which are the only ones that matter. So we're looking at a real global problem unless Trump wakes up. And when he wakes up, he's got to hit Bibi over the head and put him out. And I don't see that happening. I just don't see that happening any more than I see, though I hate to say it, Tom Massey beating this massive, massive Jewish Israeli combination of money pouring into his campaign that probably surpasses anything we've ever seen in a House of Representatives campaign in the history of the country.
Mm.
Yeah,
Larry,
we're dealing with a real disconnect between the markets, commodity markets, oil markets, financial markets, and what's actually going on in the world. Go back to the COVID epidemic and what happened to the price of oil during that period. The price of oil per barrel went up over $120. And there wasn't an actual shortage. I mean, the production, the oil wells were still pumping. The infrastructure of the oil wells was still intact. And yet the market reacted, oh my God, and they pretended like there was going to be this incredible shortage. And again, even that analysis didn't make sense, because if people were staying at home and they weren't traveling to work, the demand for actual oil was going to go down, not up. So the market should have behaved in a different way, and it didn't. Now we're seeing actual shortages. I mean, disruption of at least 20%, if not higher, of the world supply of oil. And that supply has been cut off. So we're dealing now with a 20% reduction that is not You can't just turn it around in a day. If oil production returns somehow magically to what it was on February 27th, you'd still be looking to 6 to 8 weeks of shortages. And what's the price of oil doing? It's up a little bit. $110, $111. It's not accurately reflecting what should be out there. The number one. Then the combination of these commodities that have been disrupted out of the Persian Gulf, when you look at the combination of urea and sulfur, they are critical for making fertilizer, critical. Helium, critical for computer chips. 44% of the world's supply comes out of the Persian Gulf and is not coming out now. And so what are they saying? Oh, there's a possibility of a recession? Horse shit. It's underway. I mean, for God's sake, we sit here and deceive ourselves, lie to ourselves, that if we'll be lucky if we get away with a recession.